All right. I think I actually have it working right this time. So, I believe you guys can hear me now, which is good. That's a good start. Uh, Hopefully, this sounds okay. Yeah, I streamed for 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and the audio didn't work the whole time. So, uh, oops. Lesson learned. Check your levels before you go live. Keep your levels on basically at all times, so you can know what you're doing. Oopsie poopsie. So I'm not going to be redoing everything I did, obviously, because that's insane. But I will. The basic of this video should be pretty brief. I'm going to try and keep it under like 20 minutes here, 20-30 minutes. I'm going to start with the performance of where I got to this afternoon, which I was really happy with. It's very cool. I think it sounds great. Some fun surprises, I think. So yeah, so I'm going to perform what I did. Then we'll talk about how I did it, and that'll be it for this batch. So, like I said, gonna try to keep it to around 20 to 30 minutes tops. The performance should only take like 5 minutes, and then really it's just a matter of talking about what's going on in the patch itself. So cool. All right, stay tuned. Cool. All right. So that was a little performance of what I've been cooking up. Hopefully that sounded good. Hopefully the audio worked this time because that was really annoying when it didn't work. What if I put my mic more like this, if that's better? Cool. So let's talk about the patch. So the star of the show, the iPad and the Pyramid along with the Euro Rack. This is a great combination. I really like this. It is very solid. This has been running all day. No crashes, no nothing. Pyramid's been up. iPad's been up. You know, knock on wood. This has been really smooth. So I've really been enjoying this setup. My computer is out on vacation because its battery died. And apparently when a Mac's battery dies, one, it the second you unplug it, obviously it just crashes because there's no power. Two, apparently downclocks pretty heavily if there's no battery, which was the real irritating part. I could live without a battery because it's, you know, sitting docked 90% of the time anyway, but since it was downclocking, trying to run anything on it was miserable. So I am limited to the iPad at the moment. I have a desktop behind me, but that's pretty far away and it's not really set up to do music stuff. So the iPad is my main show. And I have done a video in the past about using the iPad. I really like this workflow. Using AUM, which is this, I guess you could call it audio unit mixer. I'm not sure if it actually, if somebody knows, please correct me, but if it actually stands for something, but it is kind of like modular. You get it? It's all modular. Everything's modular. So like I set this up, it's basically a patch, right? Like these mixing channels I set up to do with what I'm doing. I can load another patch in. It would do something completely different with different channels and everything. So AUM is the main recording beast. It's actually connected via USB here to my audio interface, which is underneath my desk. Works just like you would expect it to work. I have all of my audio channels that I would normally have on my computer onto my iPad, which is sweet. Some little weird stuff with how AUM does external devices, which is not, sorry, it's not just AUM, but it's the iPad in general. It will play audio over whatever was last connected. So for example, I have the HDMI out going so that way you guys can see my screen. In order to get that to work so it's not trying to play the audio and use the audio inputs of the HDMI, all you have to do is just replug the audio interface back into the iPad after it's done, which is nice. It's very handy. So, sorry, I don't have my normal controller over here to switch between cameras and stuff, but so sequence, Pyramid, audio routing, effects, iPad, with one exception, which we'll talk about in a minute. So I just want to play these voices so you guys can hear what's going on. So let's just do this. So this is everything. So that's the chord voice. So let's do that one first because that one's easiest to control. Chords. So, and pardon my belly. The chord voice, let me turn this down a bit. The chord voice is the chord V2. See, I'm tricky. Let me turn this down a bit. I'll talk about what just happened in a second. But the chord voice is the chord V2 going, doing some fun stuff with the random step to do bit crushing, split, and then combined into the quad VCA, going through some reverb, et cetera, going back out the track. Sequencing for the quantization is all being managed by the Symphonian, like you would expect. If you've seen my previous videos, you can take a look at that and see what's going on there. That is coming into the iPad. I have one channel on the iPad that has the audio in from the Chord voice. And then I'm actually within the iPad, I'm using the ability to do sends in the iPad, and I'm sending it back into the Eurorack, and that is going into the Linnaeus, and that is what's doing that filter cutoff with the clock. So basically, Oct is gated, so when the gate is up, it'll speed up. When the gate's down, it'll slow back down, and it does it all in time. And then the wobulation, which is a technical term you don't need to understand, but the wobulation is coming from the Oct CV going into the Linnaeus. So that's the Chord voice. Let me play just the... So that is like notionally our lead voice. That is courtesy of the lip, the loquelic ateritas persidio. That is providing that lead voice. Nothing too fancy here at the moment. We might change that up yesterday. It's going into the FX8, which is providing some reverb in the rack, some additional effects courtesy of the iPad. And I'll talk about more about how I'm doing the effects on the iPad in a minute, but that's just a quick overview of that. Nothing fancy there. The next voice is the bass voice. That is the Manus Ateritas up here at the top. Nothing too fancy. These are pretty vanilla at the moment. It's going into the Tan H to give it a little more saturation, and then some additional, effects, compression, etc. on the mixer on the iPad. Pretty straightforward. Next, how about this kind of marimba voice, which I really like. Oops, wrong one. This one. That is the Antumbra Atom, which is a clone of the Mutable Instruments elements. It has its own kind of built-in reverb, but there's some additional stuff, again, compression, a little bit of EQ, stuff like that on the track itself coming in from AOM. Nothing, again, too fancy there, pretty straightforward stuff. And then finally, and this is the fun stuff, in my opinion, the drum track. And I'm going to show you, there's 3 parts of the drum track that I want to show you. So this is just the first part. So on these drums, I have 2 drum tracks. I have one drum track coming from the Modular, and that sounds like this. And then I have another set of drums that are actually from the iPad. And then you combine them, you get something like this. And that is all possible because the way I have my system set up is that, if I go back to my wide view, the FH2, which is what is doing my MIDI to CV, so the pyramid will not work realistically without some sort of MIDI to CV for Eurorack. It does have a couple CV outs, like three CV outs, but if you want to do anything complex, that's just not enough. So you need some sort of deeper MIDI to CV conversion in order to be able to do anything. So in my case, I am using the FH2. I have a bunch of expanders on it, but for the drums, for the purpose of the drums, I have one expander that's dedicated to drums specifically. And the way I have the trigger outputs on the FH2 mapped is to the same way that Ableton or Bitwig or another DAW would have its drum kit note mapping. And conveniently, the app I'm using on my iPad, which is this AR909 app, also uses the same mapping, which is really great. So and roughly speaking, I think it's like C2 is the kick drum, and then so on and so forth, snare, closed hat, open hat, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, you can change those based on how you want, but I believe that's the kind of convention, so to speak, on how it all works. So that means that assuming I stick roughly to the same standards with the triggers in my Eurorack, I can pair this app with my Eurorack drums. And by pure chance, by luck, by good design in terms of the software, everything's in sync, which is really cool. And that's what I love. I love that everything is perfectly in sync. So there's one last trick I want to show with the drums. And you guys probably heard it during the performance. That was my little surprise for you. Oh yeah. Just so that the 100 grit cuts out. So yeah, 100 grit, my favorite module by far, so far, from what I've played with, of all of the modules I own, the 100 grit is a special fancy beast. So I have the two drum kits, if you will, mixed to a secondary bus. And that bus, before it goes into the main mix bus, is also doing a send out to the 100 grit. And I have it set up, and I'll talk about this in a second, but I have a CC control, which is probably redundant. I have a CC value on the pyramid set to basically turn on and turn off the return from that send track. So that way I can either get 100 grit or not get 100 grit. And it comes in as this nice surprise during this kind of noise breakdown in the middle of the song, which was really fun. In terms of controls there, I have the planar 2. Basically, it's just modulating the frequency cutoff on the 100 grit. The idea there being that kind of reaching up into these cables is a little difficult at the moment. So pulling it down here, putting it right in front of me, gives me some nice control. I also am using another output of Oct to also do some additional kind of FM, do some modulation on the resonance of the 100 grit as well. And that because it's working in time, the same way the chord pad was, everything is kind of working in sync, which is fun. So that covers all of the Eurorack voices. The other one I want to talk about is I have a track on the pyramid set up to basically just control the Symphonian. So you guys have seen my previous videos. The way I have the Symphonian set up is that one of the MIDI tracks from the FH2 chooses the step of Symphonian. So as we progress through the song, the step of the internal Symphonian sequencer changes, and that adjusts all of the quantization happening. So rather than punching in each of these individual notes, I can have some kind of fixed pattern and then adjust it up or down based on the chord that's being played. So that's how all of the kind of major sequencing happens with the pitch data. Cool. Let's see here. I have about like 22 minutes, or a little bit more. Do a little bit more. So let me just jump to the iPad and I'll talk about what's going on in here, because there's some pretty fun stuff. Cool. So you guys should be able to see my iPad and see me. So AUM, very fancy, awesome app. It is basically just a modular mixer is kind of the way to think about it. I have the USB from the basically the MIDI from the Pyramid going to, really it's just being routed almost directly to the Eurosynth, with the exception of I also have MIDI channel 10 going to the drum kit app on the iPad as well, in addition to some fancy stuff with controlling the actual mixer with MIDI from the Pyramid as well, which is really fun. So let me just demo that, and I'll keep the iPad up so you guys can see what I'm talking about. Let me unmute this. So just keep an eye on this this channel right in the middle here, this one, because when I jump to a different part of the song, it's going to cut out. You can see that, right? I dropped the actual volume of the track, fully automated with the Pyramid, and I can bring it back. And I can do a similar thing with our kind of noise solo. When it comes back. Cool. All of that is super useful. And let me, there we go. So that's really powerful. And this is a lot to do with the Pyramid as well, in terms of what it's capable of with its sequencing. So it can sequence not only just note, data, gates, stuff like that, and some of its internal effects, but it can also send MIDI CCs over all of the channels. You have access to all 127, 128 MIDI CCs, and you can send them whichever way you want across whatever channels you want. So I basically, when I was putting together this patch, and it was, when I was recording myself without any audio, I was able to basically set it up so that almost like, almost like an Ableton, right? I can basically set up different parts to be, blank, empty, change parameter value, stuff like that. But that way I can actually turn on and turn off tracks dynamically with the sequencing on the Pyramid. And I can basically play the sequencer almost like I'm playing the session mode on Ableton or on Bitwig or something comparable, right? Where I'm basically just launching various scenes, and all of the MIDI parameters that I need to adjust get adjusted. Everything plays in time. Everything happens in lockstep. You can do way more fancy automation than just turning on and turning off stuff, to be clear. So like with the touchpad here, I can actually draw in automation, which is awesome. Really, really powerful. I really like that. But for the purposes of what I need right now, all I need to do is just turn on and turn off the track. I was messing around earlier where you can draw in your own kind of envelopes or waveforms on the track itself to do whatever sort of modulation you want. But for what I have here, I don't need anything too fancy. I just need to be able to cut tracks and stuff like that. So that's really, really handy. Let's see. I don't know that I have too much else to cover right now. Hopefully this was useful to you. I'm sorry that I just totally failed earlier and didn't actually record any audio with me patching all of this together, but that's okay. You guys get the abridged version, and hopefully you find some interesting things about us. If you guys have questions later, or stuff that I didn't get to cover that you would like me to talk about, please just drop me a comment or shoot me a message, and I will try to cover those in a future video. I will be working more on this patch tomorrow, probably finalizing it and then ripping it all out because I'm kind of sick of it. But I'm happy with where it is today. I want to do a little bit more with it tomorrow. Maybe come up with some more interesting melodies and kind of switch things up a bit. But that's where we're at today. So cool. Thank you guys. Hope you enjoyed this. Stay tuned for more stuff. Peace. Peace. Peace.